After a short drive, we made our way to the center of Cusco, and then we headed over to the airport to meet up with my dad and stepmom, who had just flown in from the United States. We had a day and a half to kill in Cusco so that they could acclimatize to the high altitude. We wandered around the city center for a bit, checking out old buildings and the absolutely spectacular central market. And then the next day, we set out to explore the archaeological sites that surround the city. Cusco is the former capital of the Inca Empire, which was, while it existed, one of the largest empires on the planet. And as you might expect from an empire of that size, the monumental architecture really is quite impressive, especially at the site of Sacsayhuaman, outside of Cusco. The largest boulder here is estimated to weigh around 70 tons, which is roughly the same weight as the right whales we saw in Puerto Madryn. The overwhelming size of these stones and the precision with which they fit together has led many people to claim extraterrestrial aid in the construction of many monumental Inca structures. Having personally studied and worked in the field of archaeology, I find this point of view to be both insulting to our ancestors who constructed these things and subtly racist. The overwhelming bulk of scientific archaeological evidence points to human creation of these structures. There is enough evidence, in fact, that many, although admittedly not all, Inca construction techniques have been replicated by modern people. And there is absolutely zero evidence for extraterrestrial intervention. So next time you hear anyone bring up extraterrestrials in the context of the construction of any ancient structure, please kindly inform them that there is no evidence to support their point of view and ask them to stop insulting the human race. The next morning, we left the motorcycle behind in Cusco and headed for the town of Ollantaytambo in the sacred valley of the Incas. We drove to the end of a longish dirt road and then got ready to start walking. This is kilometer 82, one of the starting points of the Inca Trail that leads to Machu Picchu. When you hear most people talk about the Inca Trail, they're talking about this section. But the Inca Trail was actually thousands of miles long, stretching from southern Colombia to the middle of Chile. But this section of the trail has by far the most traffic. You have to book months in advance, because only 500 people per day are allowed on the trail, and half of them reporters. Fortunately for us, my dad offered to book everything in advance and pay for it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to go. The first night, we discovered that the tents we were provided with were at least twice as big as what we were used to. First thing in the morning, we ran into a large spider wasp, dragging its prey along the side of the trail. These wasps are really cool because they dig a burrow, go out and find a giant spider, sting it to paralyze it, but they don't kill it. They drag it back to their burrow, lay their egg on the spider, and let their young devour it from the inside out while it's still alive.
This is the beginning of day 2 of the Inca Trail. We've been told that today will be all uphill with a little bit of flat ground, but also flat ground in the Andes looks like this.
No, like that.
Today is going to be the hardest day. If we make it through today, we're good to go.
Yes.
You think we'll make it?
I hope so. We have to, I mean.
The trail was incredibly hard, and we saw a number of people turn around and head back, succumbing to elevation sickness and exhaustion.
So we made it to the highest point on the Inca Trail, 4,215 meters. That was quite a hike. That's certainly the hardest hike that I can remember. Although human memory is pretty faulty, and you tend to forget how hard things were in the past, it may be the hardest hike I've ever done. The altitude really gets to you. There's not a lot of air up here.
Hello. We made it. I'm hungry.
Since we consider ourselves respectable hikers, we opted to carry as much of our gear as they would let us carry. Most people are just carrying like cameras and snacks and stuff. We decided we're going to carry all of our clothes and sleeping bags. They won't let us carry the tents, but I'm kind of glad they won't let us carry the tents.
From the highest pass, we had a long, steep descent down to the next night's camp, which was mostly stairs.
We made it to camp number 2. I feel a little bit lightheaded, but I don't think it's from the elevation. I think it's because I haven't eaten anything since like 6 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, we are very hungry.
Oh,
Getting ready.
lunch is coming!
As we continued toward Machu Picchu the next day, we noticed something about the stonework. Further from Machu Picchu, the stones are roughly cut and fit loosely together. But further down the trail, the ruins get larger and more impressive, and the stonework improves. Our guide told us that this was because the buildings with better stonework were reserved for use by the upper classes of Incan society. And as we approached Machu Picchu, the religious significance of the sites increased, thus warranting better stonework. The trail also passed through many caves on its way to Machu Picchu. Incan culture apparently held caves in some very specially high regard, because many of their most sacred sites incorporate caves directly into the buildings. This may have something to do with the origin myth of the Incas, which holds that they emerged from 3 caves high in the Andes Mountains. And as you might expect, there were also a lot of terraces on the trail. I mentioned before how impressed I was with the Andean terrace system, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number 1, they represent a huge amount of work. I don't know if anybody's crunched the numbers on it yet, but I would wager that the construction of all of the terraces in the Andes Mountains far outweighs all of the energy spent building all of the pyramids in every part of the world. And that's kind of the other reason why I find the terraces so impressive. The cultures of the Andes didn't waste a lot of time building monuments that didn't have a function. Instead, what they built was an incredibly practical infrastructure that allowed them to grow their population by transforming steep mountain slopes into easily irrigatable and manageable flat land. I should also mention that the tradition of building terraces in the Andes is far older than the Inca Empire. The Inca Empire itself only survived for a couple hundred years, but some of the terrace systems are thousands of years old. And here's another fun fact. The caretakers of Machu Picchu and the surrounding sites don't use weed whackers or machines to keep the jungle at bay and keep it off of the archaeological sites. They just graze llamas on them, like they've always done. As we continued onward, the archaeological sites were more and more frequent, and the architecture was getting more and more impressive. And I was, of course, getting more and more excited. But even though we could see the modern town of Aguascalientes at the base of Machu Picchu, we were still more than a day's hike away from the site itself. The next day we woke up at around 3 o'clock in the morning. We had to wake up this early because the porters had to pack up all of the tents and stuff and hike down to their train, which is one of the first that leaves in the morning from the town of Aguascalientes. Of course, the tour companies don't tell anyone this. They tell everybody that you will wake up early on the last day so that you can hike to the famous Sun Gate to see the sunrise. Of course, this almost never happens because it's usually cloudy. It's just a convenient excuse to help them make sure their porters catch their train on time. We continued hiking downwards, through terraces being maintained by their llama groundskeepers, and pretty quickly the citadel of Machu Picchu came into view, at which point I completely forgot to take any sort of video of it because I was busy looking at it. But I'm sure you've all seen at least one overview picture of Machu Picchu that is better than anything I could have done. But what you may not have seen is the Intihuatana, perhaps the most archaeologically significant object at Machu Picchu. The Intihuatana is a solar calendar, which the Incas presumably used to mark the solstices and equinoxes every year, so that they knew when to do important things like planting crops. And this thing is important because, as far as I know, it's the last surviving intact Intihuatana, period, anywhere. When the Spaniards arrived in South America and threw a giant wrench in the Inca Empire, they set about destroying any traces of previous religions, including the Intihuatanas, which were associated with the sun god, Inti, of the Incas. But the Spaniards never found Machu Picchu, so they couldn't destroy this one. In fact, if the Spaniards had found Machu Picchu, they probably would have destroyed a whole lot more than just the Intihuatana. The whole site is steeped in religious significance. And while we're still not sure about a great number of things, it's clear that the entire site was very important, based just on the amount of work that went into creating it. Here the stonework is absolutely exquisite. People often say that you can't fit a piece of paper between 2 stones, but I think they're actually closer together than that. Here we finally caught on camera an elusive creature we've been trying to photograph for almost the entire trip. This is a vizcacha. It looks like a cross between a rabbit and a squirrel, and it's a relative of the chinchilla. They like to live in piles of rocks, which makes this an excellent home for it. This is the Temple of the Condor, which got its name because of the resemblance it bears to the bird. If you use your imagination a bit, you can picture the large rocks above as wings, and the head down below with a white collar. Machu Picchu really is an incredible place, but at the end of our visit I was a little bit disappointed. Not with the site, but with the fact that because we had just hiked the Inca Trail, I didn't really have the energy I needed to explore the site as much as I would have liked. Completely exhausted after a couple of hours, we headed back down the mountain in a bus, on the Hiram Bingham Highway, a highway named after the first tourist to visit Machu Picchu. People often mistakenly credit Bingham with the discovery of Machu Picchu, but he was led up here by a 12-year-old boy whose family had been farming the terraces for quite some time, and that boy also gave the first guided tour of the site of Machu Picchu. Things have changed a bit since then, with as many as 1 million people visiting this site every year. But strangely enough, there's still no road to it. The only way to get to Machu Picchu is to take a train, or walk. And the same goes for getting away from Machu Picchu. Fortunately, we got to take a train instead of walking. The train did for us in a couple hours what had taken us 4 days to walk, and a couple hours after nightfall we found ourselves back in the city of Cusco. The next morning we said goodbye to my dad and stepmom, packed up our things, and then said goodbye to Cusco as well. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks everyone for all your support and encouragement, and as usual, if you have any questions or comments, please do let me know. We'll see you all next time.